Over the last 7 weeks, I've attempted to train and eat like every single Hashira from Demon Slayer, and this week, I have to try to take on Muichiro's challenge. Don't ask me why this is like this. It's just the way it is. Demon Slayer has inspired me to get in shape before, but this time I'm using it for another reason. I want to try to touch my toes before the release of Infinity Castle. So not only am I making all of the Hashira's favorite foods, but I'm attempting to touch my toes. And if I don't, I'm gonna buy you guys some movie tickets. All you have to do is sign up for my newsletter below and I'll let you know who wins. But now it's time for Muichiro. Let's start with some breakfast. The first dish for breakfast is something I've never actually had before, and it happens to be Muichiro's favorite. It's called furofuki daikon, a type of simmered daikon radish you might find in a bowl of oden. Now, oden usually has a mix of meats, fish, and fish cakes and vegetables all simmered together, but furofuki daikon is different. It's just daikon, by itself, nothing else. The flavor is actually deeper than you might expect, and it kind of reminds me of Muichiro himself. Small and unassuming, but super powerful. In fact, he even gave Sanemi and Obanai a run for their money in a 2-on-1 fight, and I think he really leveled up after the events with Tanjiro during the Swordsmith Village arc. Historically, furofuki daikon has been around for centuries, but in the Taisho era, it became especially popular as a comfort food during colder months. During this time, Japan saw rapid urbanization, meaning more workers and students were eating outside of their home, like you see today in modern-day Tokyo. Oden stalls were a common and affordable way to get a hot meal, and furofuki daikon was one of the easiest components to prepare in bulk. Plus, it's really fun to say, furofuki daikon. It's cheap, filling, and warming for those colder months. It also stores really well, making it kind of a practical choice for vendors who serve customers late at night. That's why I think it's kind of the perfect fit for this time period. It's exactly the kind of simple, satisfying dish someone like Muichiro could have enjoyed after a long day of training. To make it, you start by cutting peeled daikon into about 2-inch tall pieces with no skin on the daikon. Boil them in water until they're slightly soft in the middle, not fully cooked though. You're going to remove them from the water, and then we're going to simmer them in kelp dashi. This is just kelp, no fish flakes. Dashi is the key here though. It infuses the daikon with a ton of flavor. But you don't want to cook it in the dashi from the start, or the flavor will just get too strong. 10 to 15 minutes into the second simmer is plenty to make the daikon tender all the way through. One of the secrets I learned is actually adding in a bit of the rice into the water when you boil it to give it a nice starchy texture. Now this miso sauce that I'm feeding Muichiro was super simple. It's just white miso and enough water to help it be a little liquidy, and just a little bit of lemon zest to help flavor the miso. During the second boil, you do want to make sure that you put the daikon into fresh water before you start the second boil. This is just to help remove any of the starch that may have been stuck to the daikon from when we added the rice in there. After the second boil is done for those 10 to 15 minutes, this daikon is ready to plate up, and it's as simple as taking a hot piece of daikon directly out of the broth and then topping it off with that really beautiful loose miso sauce. I'm also throwing in just a little bit of seaweed to give it some color, and a slice of lemon to give it extra pop. Unsurprisingly, this is Muichiro's favorite dish, and I can't wait to dig into this. What I find interesting about this dish, the furofuki daikon, is that it's a dish mostly enjoyed in the fall and the winter. Judging by how it looks during the Swordsmith Village arc, it definitely wasn't wintertime because there's no snow in the mountains or anything like that, but the only time we really saw winter was during the first episode when we were introduced to Tanjiro and his family. But this is Muichiro, the Mist Hashira's favorite food, and I can probably see why. It's super simple. It looks like it would be something very comforting, and honestly, I wonder if it's a dish that maybe he had as a kid. It's also super easy to make. You literally just throw it into a pot a couple of times and boil it, and then throw this beautiful salty miso sauce on top. Cheers. You have to very much like daikon to enjoy this, and I very much enjoy daikon. It's perfectly soft. You can see when I insert the knife, it just kind of cuts straight through. The miso adds a ton of flavor. I feel like if you didn't have the miso, it wouldn't taste like much. Even though we did season the broth that it continued to cook in, you do need some kind of a miso sauce. But I also think the daikon itself is such a neutral flavor that you could absolutely put on some barbecue sauce onto this, maybe cut it in half lengthwise and throw some cheese on it. Just have some fun with it. Throw it on the grill, you do you. This is fantastic. This is also like 120 calories. So today is going to be a rough start, but I gotta go stretch because I think I'm so close to my toes. All right, let's get this done. We're gonna be so gassy. 7 weeks ago when I was training like Mid-City for this challenge, I couldn't get anywhere near my toes. And this is how far I have gotten by learning how to breathe like a Demon Slayer. I can now touch my toes by rounding my back, which is not part of the thing that I'm trying to do, but I can still finally touch my toes. I still need to go a little bit further though. I'm using a ton of breathing techniques to make sure that my knees are locked, so this way I get a nice stretch on the hamstrings. I'm still incredibly excited that I can do this, but I still have work to do. Since my body is still incredibly tight as I've gotten a bit older, I'm using this really light barbell to help me stretch while keeping my knees straight and my back flat. This is a very different stretching technique, but I feel like it's really important for those of us who are getting a little bit older, and anyone can do this with a really light weight. This weight is only about 15 pounds, so you can just grab yourself a heavy book and do this right now. Literally, stand up, go grab a heavy book and do these little bits of stretches. Don't use anything too heavy. You just need something light. I also, of course, did the Instagram model stretch because I think it's one of the better stretches, unfortunately, for its position. With stretching training done today, I'm so excited to now have, well, we're not going to be by an ocean, but we are going to be having cake. I need to get out of this cardio room. It's giving me nightmares. I don't want to be here. I don't want to do more cardio than I have to do later today. One of the dishes I decided to reflect Muichiro is Castella cake. Now, Castella cake actually predates the Taisho era. It first came to Japan from Portugal around the 1600s, brought by traders to Nagasaki. Over time though, the Japanese adapted it to their own version called Castella, which you can find everywhere throughout Japan. By the Taisho era, Japan was undergoing rapid modernization, similarly to what we spoke about during Mitsuri's training as well. Western style confections were becoming more and more accessible. Bakers began blending Japanese and European techniques, and Castella's soft, delicate sponge was the perfect bridge between the two worlds. As people spent more time outside their homes for work, leisure, and travel, sweet shops and street vendors became gathering spots and extremely popular. And Castella cake was easy, portable, and delicious. It symbolized the era's extra mix of tradition and modernity, but also the heavy use of wheat product. Making Castella cake isn't overly difficult. It's basically a vanilla chiffon style sponge cake, but with just a few differences. Notably is the color that you want to get on this Castella cake. I didn't make this properly, so I didn't get a ton of color, but one of the techniques I had learned was just using a torch to give it some browning. The Castella cake also gets soaked in a honey syrup. The honey syrup is literally just honey and warm water, and you brush this on very liberally to help flavor the cake. The only thing is you do have to let this rest overnight before cutting. It kind of reminds me of making baklava, where you take a cold or a hot cake and add cold or hot syrup depending on which one's cold and which one's hot, but always make sure one is cold and one is hot. Does that make sense? So in my case, I used hot cake but somewhat cold syrup. But this cake that I've made today is not the cake that I'm actually going to eat. I decided to take a note from the Taisho era and visited a local shop that had a homemade Castella cake. They didn't only have Castella cake though. They had a variety of different Korean, Japanese, and Taiwanese inspired sweets. Honestly, I wanted to go all in on this sweets cafe, but I just honed in on where they had the homemade Castella cakes. They had a few different varieties. One of them included a yuzu variety, which I was super curious about, but I knew I needed to try their premium honey Castella cake. Apparently, this bag was strong enough to take on Muzan by himself, but I eventually became smarter than the bag and had access to my cake. The one thing with this cake in particular, though, is that I lost some of the top of the cake trying to get it out of the packaging. But in my case, there is never lost tops of cakes. I yanked that right out of the bag because this looked so good, I didn't want any of it to go to waste. No cake was wasted today. Now, this cake does still look really good, even with those little top pieces missing. I mean, it's spongy, it's golden, it's beautiful, it has an amazing looking crust, and I can't wait to have this for lunch. I mean, if you could get Castella cake at the drop of a hat, why wouldn't you? Cheers. This is really good. Imagine just sitting in a bakery with an entire cake. Not me. I feel like this is right up Muichiro's alley. What's not up my alley is the amount of running I'm about to do after eating cake. But it's worth it. Eat cake, go running. So, new shirt. Now, Muichiro is incredibly fast, like insanely fast. Look at this clip where he's fighting Tsunemi and Obonai. You can't even keep up with him. So now the second part of the day to work off the cake and the tea and the daikon, that's not even really something you should need to work off. It has like nothing in it. It's just vegetables and broth. I'm going to do a few sprints, and it is 97 degrees outside, 1 degree short of a boy band. This is it's honestly pretty miserable out here. So I'll do a couple, and then I'm gonna go make dinner. This is awful. This is an awful day. I hope my camera doesn't explode while I'm recording this. Now, even though I do have to train in sprinting today, it doesn't mean I don't warm up with a quick jog. But I wasn't the only one out here training in the heat like Demon Slayer. I need to be fast like Muichiro, and look at this is not fast like Muichiro at all. I even left my microphone in my pocket, so that's what that sounds like. But as soon as I got down to my 100-yard sprint, I came right back, faster than Muichiro could ever be. Look, I kind of wish I was as fast as Muichiro, but I just look like an oversized penguin. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I had to do that. When I bring you along for the ride, it literally looks like I'm walking at a somewhat fast pace. But hey, at least I have really cool sunglasses.
It is way too hot out here for this. Oh Lord, what? My feet are on fire. Who signed up for? Imagine being like the water Hashira and just deciding you wanted to cool off, you know? Maybe that's the most overpowered Hashira. I mean, or it could be the fire Hashira, then you just never get hot. I don't know which one is the best. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I could be either one, you know, maybe both.
I think this is why Tanjiro is so powerful. He can cool himself down and heat himself up. He has the best of both worlds, unlike me on this mat right now. Each week, I'm also trying to get better at my butterfly kick, but it's also something I haven't trained that well in, especially because I don't have a gym mat to really practice this on. So I channeled my inner Mitsuri and tried to land a few butterfly kicks that I was happy with.
It's too hot. It's too hot. Nope, and you're coming with me. It's too hot out here. We need to go back in where it's cooler and get some food, okay? Okay, pumpkin?
I don't think you guys realize how difficult it is trying to train in 98-degree weather. We did achieve boy band status, but I wasn't very happy about it. I've actually not eaten a lot of calories today because Muichiro's diet is relatively simple. And this dinner is also not going to be a lot of calories because it's mostly potato. But I did have something else in mind, and it's actually a very special dish that I think you're all going to really enjoy, and it's something that I ate quite a bit of in Japan, which showed up on the scale later. And that dish is called koroke, or croquets. Croquets began to appear in the late 19th century during the Meiji era of Japan. The reason for that is, once again, Japan adopting Western-style dishes into their daily lives. What's interesting about the croquet, though, is that it has French origins based on mashed potatoes with maybe a cream or a bechamel. But in the case of the Japanese version, it's mostly just mashed potato. I think this actually gives it a really light, fluffy texture versus a heavy, denser texture you might find in the French variety. So in my case, I scooped out one leftover baked potato, keeping the skins for later, and then just microwaved it to heat it up a bit and adding in some salt and pepper to make the base of my croquet. Croquets are inexpensive, they're super filling, and they're really easy to produce in mass. I was able to find these all over the place in Tokyo. Normally, it can be filled with cheese, beef, other vegetables, but I figure since I have some of the leftover daikon that I simmered that I had for breakfast, I may as well try this in here. I've never actually had it that way before. I don't think I ever had it in Japan that way either. So this is gonna be a very interesting experiment, but I wanna try it. The most common variety of the croquet is just a standard potato croquet, but a lot of the times you'll find different mincemeats, other vegetables, and even sometimes seafood in these. So in this case, this might be the very first time you're gonna see furufuki daikon inside of a potato croquet. Since my potato was a little dry because I am using russet or Idaho potatoes, I had to add a little bit of hot water to help mash this together because you do want this to be able to hold up when it fries. Here's another pro tip. You could also use leftover mashed potatoes to make these. You don't have to make the potatoes from scratch like I did. Just use leftover mash. We used to do it all the time when I worked at an Irish restaurant. Those Sunday morning hush puppy and fritters, leftover mashed potatoes. This is why I think brunch is extremely overrated, because a lot of the times you're just being served leftovers from Saturday night's dinner. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just saying, you guys are paying $19 for steak and eggs, and that steak was made the night before. But now it's time for the cheese tax. I know, come on. I decided I wanted some cheese in my fritters, so we have to pay the cheese tax. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. There you go. Get your cheese tax. You know what it is. Now that Gandalf has been paid his tax, it's time to stuff some of this cheese into these potato croquets, and you want a decent amount in here. No, Gandalf, you can't have any more of this. No, put that paw away, sir. Gandalf is way too smart. Look at him just eyeball. He knows exactly where the cheese went. Mine. Is this how you guys defend yourself against your cats? You just kiss them over the head until they stop doing whatever they're doing? After a little bit of forming of my potatoes, these are ready. 2 cheese-filled croquets. I still can't say. I want to say karaoke, but it's koroke. Gotta think about it. Back up, dude. Get away from my cutting board. Get away from my cutting board. No. Get up, I'm sticky and sweaty and it's been a long day. Now, since I am going to be deep frying these in a shallow pan, I need to make sure that they're not too thick. What I also think is fascinating about this dish and a lot of the dishes we've been discovering on this journey is how heavily influenced they are by westernization. Something as simple as using flour to dredge the potato is not something we may have seen before this time period or the early 1900s. But now we're seeing flour used everywhere throughout Japan. From breads to noodles to even, yes, tempura, we started to see this pop up more and more often, not only in restaurants, but on the street at street food stalls and in homes across Japan. I think this time in Japanese culture is extremely exciting because you start to see the blend of different cultures come together. Once I have both of my croquets completely coated in the panko breadcrumb, this is where I could actually start shallow frying it. I actually really enjoy shallow frying because you don't have to use as much oil. I have my oil at 325 degrees Fahrenheit. Any hotter and you might actually burn the outside without having the inside cook properly. Now, if you don't actually want to shallow fry or deep fry these would work really, really well in an air fryer. Granted, in the Taisho era of Japan, they may not have had air fryers, so this was really the only choice that they had, especially when working with breadcrumbs. Okay, hear me out. This is complete speculation, but if Tanjiro swings his sword very, very quickly while using flame breathing, he might actually create an air fryer. An air fryer is just hot air being blown around consistently. Kind of like me when I do a lot of these voiceovers. After around 4 or 5 minutes of shallow frying these croquets, they're ready to plate up. And traditionally, it would be plated up with a bunch of shredded cabbage, but I have some leftover shredded lettuce, and I'm also plating it up with this really delicious sauce. Paul, what sauce is this? Is this from the Taisho era? This sauce, I'm so glad you asked. It's actually from Cooking with Chaos, my brand new infinite recipe card system. And don't ask me how long it's been there. Maybe during the sprints, it may have gotten in the way. At least they're slightly water resistant. Cooking with Chaos is my infinite recipe card system featuring 60 different recipe cards you can mix and match to make brand new meals every single time. So not only can you mix and match any of the 3 different cards to combine to make a new meal, but you can use cards individually to spice up the meal that you're eating right now. Pick from 20 different sauces, 20 different proteins, and 20 different sides to make your favorite new meal. Something you may have not ever had before. But don't take my word for it. Look at what the community has already made with some of their favorite combinations. And hey, if you don't feel like picking dinner that night, just roll the D20 because every card has a 20-sided die mechanic in the top right corner where you can just roll a die and let fate decide your meal that night. You can pick up Cooking with Chaos at the link down below over at cookingwithchaos.gg or with the QR code on screen. This has been a labor of love for the past few years and I can't wait for you to try it out. I also can't wait to try out this tangy spicy mayo with these croquets. I think that's gonna be fantastic. My favorite style of croquet is actually like a meat-filled one. You'll find those pretty commonly out in Japan where they mix cooked beef into the potato and then fry that. So you get bits of beef throughout. I wanna see what the cheese looks like inside. You ready? Let's get a little, maybe we'll get a cheese pull. Oh, look at that. Look. That looks so good. That is a nice cheese pull. Oh, baby. That looks so good. Now, cheese was starting to become more and more common during the Taisho era because of Western influences, so this could have happened. I'm not saying it did, but it could have. I'm gonna taste this on its own before I dip it into the tangy spicy mayo. Cheers. What's interesting is that you can smell the daikon more than you can taste it. The potatoes themselves are nice and hot. They're seasoned really well with just the salt and pepper. The mozzarella gives it a nice flavor and texture as well. The coating on the outside is perfect. It gives it this nice crunch, but it's not too thick. This is just really good and really subtle. It doesn't punch you in the face. But I wanna try it with the tangy spicy mayo because I think that's gonna actually punch me in the face. Cheers. The sauce makes it 10 times better. And I'm not saying that because Cooking with Chaos is my own product. I'm saying that because I love the flavors of this sauce with the potato and the cheese and the crunchy. This is just really, really good. But now I have to deal with the next Hashira, Shinobu. Make sure you get subscribed to keep up with the series and make sure you pick up Cooking with Chaos over at cookingwithchaos.gg or with the QR code on screen over here. My name is Chef PK and remember, keep playing with your food.